Okay, we seem to be holding steady at the number of folks in here, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. I will start with housekeeping, which is that we will ask everyone to be on mute since we have a bit of a large group today. Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome, thanks for joining. My name is Kimberly Howard. I'm a director with the Homeless Services Division here at the City of Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. And I'm joined by several members of the DFSS Homeless Services team today to walk through our division's request for proposals. As you hopefully know, this session is sort of one of 3 opportunities that are organized by the city's Office of Budget and Management for us to sort of inform potential applicants of funding opportunities through the Community Development Grant Application or CDGA process. And if you have joined this breakout room, it is because you are interested in homeless services, RFPs. If that is not you, now is a great time to hit that leave room button at the top right corner. And if it is you, then let's get into it. Okay, so what we will be doing in our session today, I will start with sort of some top line things to know across all of the Homeless Services Division RFPs. And then I will be passing to members of our team to do a very brief overview of each of the RFPs that we are releasing as part of this round. If you've had a chance to sort of review the CDGA book at this point, you will know that we are trying to cover sort of roughly 100 pages of content today. So we will not be going through sort of super detail on each of these RFPs, but really to sort of hit the highlights of what we're looking to fund and then make space to answer your questions today. And for RFPs that you are interested in applying for, we encourage you to very carefully read those RFPs. So I will start with top line things. So basically agenda today, top line things to know, brief overview of each RFP, and then we'll open for questions at the end. So as we go, please feel free to drop questions in the chat, but we will try to answer questions sort of at the end of the session. I will note that sort of any questions that we answer with sort of new or clarifying information will sort of get written up in a written amendment that will be released as part of the RFP so that every potential applicant.
Kim, it looks.
Lose Kim?
Yeah, I think we might have just lost Kim here. Hold on one second. Having some technical difficulties, y'all. Kim, are you back?
I am back. I am so sorry. That dropped for some reason. I am going to go ahead and go off video just in case that is a reason we're struggling. Okay, so to keep us moving, please drop any questions in the chat. Any questions that we sort of answer today with new or clarifying information will be provided in a written amendment to the RFP that will be made available to all potential applicants. And also flagging, if we're not able to answer a question today, we will include the response in that written amendment. Okay, so going right into it, starting with some key things to know about all of the Homeless Services Division RFPs. Overall, we have 9 total RFPs that are included in the CDGA round. These RFPs are seeking to fund an array of homeless services programs as part of our sort of 3-pronged approach to addressing homelessness. So you will see program models that seek to prevent households from experiencing homelessness whenever possible, program models that help us maintain a safe and accessible crisis response system for when folks do experience homelessness, and then program models that support permanent housing pathways for households to rapidly exit homelessness. All current delegates that were funded through CDGA RFPs previously are required to reapply. So to say that in another way, everyone needs to apply through the CDGA to recompete for 2026 service funding. I will note we do have a couple RFPs that were included in the last CDGA round that we will not see in this CDGA round. That is the Homeless Prevention Assistance Program RFP, the Coordinated Entry System Facilitator RFP, and then the Housing System Navigators Program Model, which was previously under an RFP called Engagement Services. Just flagging that the RFPs that are included in this round will be programs that will likely be partially funded with federal funds. We do have some remaining funding, and so we may issue additional RFPs this year that could include these program models. If you were previously funded under these program models, you have already heard from the DFSS team, but we will also be providing additional guidance shortly. But want to flag, we will not be talking about those 3 RFPs today. Okay, other key things to know. I think the main thing that will be of interest to returning applicants is that the contract term looks different this time around. So most of these RFPs, you will see an initial 3-year contract term from January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2028. And then there are 2 options to extend, each for no more than 1 year. So overall, we're looking at up to a 5-year contract term, which is longer than we've provided in previous CDGA rounds. To apply to these RFPs, the application will open on April 1st, and applications will close June 2nd. Please do not wait until June 2nd to apply. Please get your application in early to avoid any complications with submitting. And then lastly, so each RFP will sort of have details included in it on how we will evaluate applications. But across the board, applications will be scored on this sort of 0 to 100 point scale. So the maximum points any application can receive is 100 points. And you will see selection criteria in each RFP in sort of the following categories. So the first is community involvement. So how your agency sort of engages and reflects the community you will serve. The second is organizational capacity, so staffing and infrastructure to be able to successfully carry out the proposed program. Strength of proposed program, so what are you actually proposing to do to meet the needs of your target population, and how are you sort of following best practices? Performance management and outcomes. So do you have data and evidence of being able to achieve the outcomes we're seeking in these RFPs? And then lastly, reasonable cost, budget justification, and leverage of funds. So is the budget that you're putting forth reasonable for the program you're proposing? And are you bringing in additional funds to support successful operations of that program? And lastly, programs funded through CDGA will be funded with a combination of federal, state, and local funds, with each funding source representing a separate contract. So if you are awarded through these RFPs, you may receive multiple contracts from us based on receiving multiple funding sources. I will actually pause here for any sort of top line questions about Homeless Services Division RFPs, and then we will go into some specifics about each of these 9 RFPs.
Hey, Kim, there's a question from Tammy in the chat on whether they will receive a copy of these slides following this.
I think so. At the very least, OBM I know will be sharing a version of this recording, so they'll be available there. I think they're also planning to share a copy of slides.
That's the only question in the chat though, right now.
Great.
Oh, no, one just came in.
Yep, I see one just came in from Andrew. Thanks. Yeah, do in-kind sources count as leverage of funds? So each RFP will sort of be specific about what is the matching requirement for most of these program models. Yes, that is included. Okay, so with that, here's our sort of full list of RFPs that we will be talking about today. We will go through centralized shelter intake, transportation, and crisis response, drop-in centers, Fuse, homeless street outreach, permanent supportive housing, the rapid rehousing program coordinator, rental assistance program manager, shelter and youth transitional housing. So to the question that just came in the chat, we will not be covering those housing programs. I am not sure which breakout session covers those, but if you want to leave this room and go back to the main room, folks there are available to help people navigate between rooms. Okay, and with that, I am going to pass over to Jeremy to walk through the first RFP.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jeremy Nichols. I'm a project manager in the Homeless Services Division, and I'm overseeing the centralized shelter intake, transportation, and crisis response RFP. Um, so the goal of this RFP is to quickly connect anyone requesting shelter or crisis response or need of a crisis response to the necessary intervention with a seamless sort of trauma-informed approach. We're seeking one agency to manage Chicago's citywide shelter intake and crisis response system. Key thing to note here is that the program operates 24/7, 365 days of the year. The selected agency will coordinate real-time shelter bed tracking, respond to 311 shelter and crisis requests, provide transportation and referrals to shelter and other safe locations, conduct well-being checks for at-risk seniors and displaced residents. The agency must demonstrate strong logistics and data management capacity, the ability to build relationships with shelter providers, support diversion strategies out of the before the shelter intervention is required, and ensure timely person-centered crisis response. For the funding sources, we anticipate funding with a mix of ESG, CDBG funds, and city funds, with the award range being $4,950,000 annually. One thing to note here is that of all of our RFPs, this one has a different contract period. The contract is January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2026, with an option to extend up to 4 additional years based on need, performance, and a funding availability. I just want to double check and make sure there's any other thing. We intend to make one award, but respondents are encouraged to subcontract with other organizations to fulfill their program requirements if they believe that would help them to deliver a superior product. Key program requirements, already mentioned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking for a delegate to address cultural competencies, language access needs to adequately serve the non-English speaking population that needs to access this crisis response system. And then we are also requesting the respondents provide staffing support for for our shelter placement and resource center delegate that serves as a waiting area for individual households in need of shelter. But I will stop there. That is a very quick overview. I would recommend thoroughly reading the full RFP for more details. And one thing to note is I believe in the RFP book with the full RFP, my email address is spelled incorrectly. I will drop it in the chat, but any further questions can come to my my correct email, and we will get that those questions answered and submitted into the amendment.
Thanks, Jeremy. And reminder for folks, if you have questions on RFPs as we go through, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll come back to them at the end. I will move us along to drop-in centers and pass over to Alex.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Alejandra Magaña. I also go by Alex. I'm one of the directors here. Zuri is actually the project manager that oversees the drop-ins, and it's her name and email that's on the RFPs, but she's out, so I'm kind of just covering for her, but just wanted to note that. But overall for the drop-in centers, you know, these are programs that provide daytime support for people experiencing homelessness, that offer access to basic needs, case management, and referrals to housing and health services. You know, providers must engage diverse population using trauma-informed, person-centered approaches and participate in citywide homeless response efforts. Ideally, applicants will have experience in homeless services and can operate in under-resourced areas and manage coordinated care and community engagement. Overall, the funding source for this is city, state, and federal sources, including CDBG. And we are looking, or the range for this award is between 8 to 10, and the awards range from 60,000 to 350. The contract period, unlike the previous program, this is for that 3-year period with 2 optional 1-year extensions. One thing to note specifically for drop-in centers is that the youth and adult drop-in centers will be scored in separate categories to ensure both population needs are adequately addressed. So that's something to keep in mind. For the specific program requirements, you can see in detail in the RFP. But one thing that we do look for with the drop-ins is to ensure that, especially during inclement weather, that we can have drop-in providers that can possibly extend their hours to be able to accommodate those that are in need during those extreme weather events. So something to keep in mind for that drop-in. And we are looking specifically for drop-ins throughout the city because they do work as the drop-in centers do impact the wider assistant front door. And so that's something that we are definitely looking for with applicants to this specific RFP.
Great, thank you, Alex. I will move us along to frequent user service engagement. And I will actually cover this today. So basically the goal of the FUSE program is to engage highly vulnerable families with children experiencing homelessness that are frequent users of the shelter system and help them in their transition to permanent housing. So this is a program that will partner closely with family shelters. They must serve families citywide, conduct outreach and training on what their services are, and then offer those supportive services like childcare, transportation, job readiness, or any additional supports that families need to both move into housing and sort of be successful after their exit from shelter. Our ideal applicants will have experience working with vulnerable families, with sort of referring and coordinating with mental health and housing services, and be able to provide both in-person and virtual trauma-informed care. The primary funding source for this will be city corporate dollars, but may be supplemented with other city, state, or federal funds. We anticipate funding one agency at $350,000 annually, and these contracts will operate on a reimbursement basis only. Same contract period as the rest of the RFPs. Okay, and I will pass along to Jeremy again for street outreach.
Hello, I'm back. All right, in addition to centralized shelter intake, I also oversee homeless street outreach RFPs. So the goal of the homeless street outreach RFP is to provide, have delegates provide geographically specific, and specialized street outreach services for Chicagoans experiencing homelessness, resulting in an increase in the number of individuals who are engaged, assessed, receiving case management, and successfully transition to more stable housing or shelter. DFSS will seek to fund programs that engage individuals who might not seek out services, have multiple barriers to maintaining stable housing, and/or have experienced long-term unsheltered homelessness. A brief service overview. Programs should provide client-centered services that meet clients where they are, both in terms of the level of need and their specific geography. And programs must assist participants match through CS to gain documentation and schedule and follow through on appointments for housing and provide a warm handoff to housing providers. Providers must also implement a service delivery model that incorporates tenets of harm reduction, trauma-informed care, and strength-based practices. And key program requirements, programs must have a staffing plan that ensures the outreach staff are not in the field alone and are at least providing services in a dyad model. The staffing plan should allow for at least one dyad to be in the field 4 days a week. Something to note about guidance for respondents. We will be implementing in this RFP, outreach will be conducted in the city is broken up into 6 geographic regions, as well as outreach on the CTA blue and red lines, a 24/7 O'Hare outreach team, and respondents can also apply for overnight youth-specific outreach or other specialty programming that they believe would fit the needs of this RFP. Respondents will need to submit individual awards for each region. Those regions are clearly defined in the RFP book, so I would encourage everyone to read over those. And the funding sources will be city, state, and federal sources, including CDBG, with an award range of $57,000 up to $1,300,000. Based on program size, we anticipate funding 13 to 15 projects. This will be a reimbursement only RFP, and the contract period is in line with the rest of the RFPs other than centralized shelter intake, with a contract period of the January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2028, with 2 possible 1-year extensions.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. And I will pass over to Nastasha for permanent supportive housing.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nastasha Flowers. I'm the project coordinator who oversees the permanent supportive housing services, including safe havens, and I will be overseeing this RFP. So the permanent supportive housing and support services and safe havens programs fund supportive services to help formerly homeless individuals and families maintain housing stability or receive care in service-enriched environments. Providers offer tailored case management, health and employment support, or health employment support and crisis services for high-need clients, including those with mental illness or chronic conditions. Ideal applicants have experience in supportive housing or health services and can deliver ongoing individualized support to vulnerable populations. The funding sources for this are city, state, and federal sources, including the CDBG. The award range is $30,500 to $620,000, depending on program size. DFSS anticipates funding 17 programs, and the contract period for this RFP is January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2028, with 2 optional 1-year extensions. And just some important things to note about this RFP. DFSS will not fund new initiatives through this RFP. So essentially, applicants who have been applied before and been awarded will be able to reapply, but no new applicants will be accepted at this point in time. And I think that is all for me. I don't know if there were any questions in the chat, but.
There are a couple questions that I think we can come back to at the end. I will pass over to Cameron for rapid rehousing.
Good afternoon, everyone. Cameron Kinch, project manager with DFSS, he, his pronouns, and I will talk you through the rapid rehousing program coordinator role, which is one that falls under my portfolio. Rapid rehousing is a program that's designed to assist households experiencing homelessness to secure permanent housing quickly and achieve housing stability. The services offered by rapid rehousing include things like landlord engagement, housing identification, case management services, housing stabilization services, which can include things like employment, assistance with income and benefits, and most importantly, short and medium term rental assistance to support the households as they transition back into housing. The selected agency for this RFP will be expected to administer between 24 million and 30 million annually. They will support things like accelerated moving events, as well as connecting clients to services. The ideal applicants will have experience in managing large-scale housing programs, public funding, and landlord engagement with the capacity to serve households referred through the Chicago Coordinated Entry System. This is braided funding, so there will be multiple funding sources for this award, and it is reimbursement only. And yeah, we have you can see on the slides the contract period as well as the extensions. I think that will cover it for me on rapid rehousing. I can jump, since I'm next, Kim, into the rental assistance program. Right. So the rental assistance program The goal of this program is to reduce the number of individuals and families who are at risk of homelessness by providing short-term financial assistance to help stabilize whatever housing crisis they're currently in. We're looking for one agency to manage this. Clients will apply or applicants will apply for this program through the community service centers, and that agency will handle the applicants and the incoming households. And then the Rapid Rental Assistance Program will be responsible for conducting housing inspections to make sure the homes are still livable and safe. They'll also be responsible for managing payments to property owners and tracking financial data in real time. Applicants must process high payment volumes efficiently, collaborate with the community service centers, ensure compliance with audit and grant requirements, and streamline operations to support the program goals. Yeah, again, this is another multi-funded braided funding. The range is between 400,000 and 800,000 annually. And the contract periods, again, same as rapid rehousing. And I believe that is it for me for a moment.
Thanks, Cameron, and we will pass over to Lucy.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to talk about the shelter RFP. DFSS is seeking proposals for shelter program to support individuals and families experiencing homelessness, including single individuals, couples, families, youth, and those fleeing domestic violence. The goal of this RFP is to provide a safe, accessible shelter while helping clients transition into permanent housing. Providers must use a housing first approach, harm reduction strategies, and trauma-informed care, and ensure that client self-determination in accessing housing services. This RFP aims to expand access to shelter, reduce length of stay, improve rehousing outcomes, and ensure equitable access to services. I encourage everyone to read through the RFP. There's a lot more in there. The funding sources would be city, state, and federal sources, including CDBG. The award range is $100,000 to $4.1 million, depending on the size and scope of the program. DFSS will fund around 30 agencies. The contract period is January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2028, with 2 possible 1-year extensions. You will notice that in the RFP, it includes languages that advances for cost will be considered according to the city's advance payment policy. And we'll ask if you are all interested in exercising this option. If this is not a guarantee, and it is not a guarantee that we will be able to provide advances. At this point, the DFSS is pursuing this as an option with the city and is interested in understanding interest in advances. I think that's all for me.
Great, thank you, Lucy. And thanks all for.
Is this going to be 30 new programs that you're going to be funding, or is this including some of the shelters that are already funded?
Yeah, great question. So again, everyone who is currently funded through DFSS through the previous CDGA round will need to recompete for funding. So when we say 30 agencies, that includes sort of everyone who's operating a shelter with DFSS funds.
So there will be no new programs funded?
No, that is, we may fund new programs. Basically based on sort of previous application rounds, we anticipate that we will fund about 30 agencies.
New agencies?
30 agencies total, which may include new or returning agencies.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm seeing a lot of great questions come through in the chat. I think let's see, we have one more program model to go, so we'll wrap up there and then open up and answer any questions we can.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cameron, I'm passing back to you. Thank you.
Yep. Just to remind everyone, Cameron Kinch. This actually is the RFP manager is currently on vacation. So if you look at the RFP in the CDGA booklet, you will see Angela Johnny listed. as the project manager for this. So yeah, if you do, we'll definitely be able to answer any questions you have about this one today on here. But if you have questions following this meeting, don't hesitate to email them or reach out. But yeah, the Youth Transitional Housing Program funds medium-term housing for unaccompanied or parenting youth ages 14 to 24. Those are youth that are experiencing housing instability of some kind, and our goal is to help them transition to stable housing and long-term success. Again, this is a wraparound program model that provides support services, case management, education, employment, mental health, along with a safe place to stay. Housing types can vary and services must be developmentally appropriate and low barrier. We're seeking programs with flexible eligibility, strong community connections, and a system for quick housing placements. Since this is a temporary and transitional housing, it's not long-term, so we want to make sure that these applicants are also helping with long-term housing options. Again, braided funding, the award can range anywhere from 40,000, or in the past is awarded 40,000 to 150,000 annually. We expect to fund around 6 projects. Again, this would be reimbursement only. And that will be it for me.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that wraps our overview of the 9 RFPs. I'm going to come back to this top slide, which has contact information for each of the RFPs, sort of who to reach out to with programmatic questions as you are reading through the RFP. Again, sort of any question that produces sort of new or clarifying information, we will share that response through a written amendment to the RFP. But also feel free to continue putting your questions in the chat, and I'm going to start working our way through these from the top. So I think the last question that we haven't covered is from Mark on documentation for rapid rehousing and what might be required for the 10% in-kind match. That is a very good question that I am going to punt for us to answer through the written amendment to make sure we give you a comprehensive answer on that. Your second question on the RFP seems to imply client level data will need to be reported rather than only aggregate. Yes, so in the RFP, we sort of lay out what will be the sort of contract management and data reporting requirements. For the rapid rehousing program coordinator, we do anticipate that you will submit sort of aggregate reports on a quarterly basis, but we are sort of reserving the right to request additional potentially client level demographic, performance, or service data. And that would be sort of in conversation between DFSS and the delegate agency. I will say sort of the goal of that would be really to sort of be collaboratively working on understanding performance and improving performance throughout the course of the contract.
Really helpful answers, thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm seeing additional questions from Mark for RAP. What kind of stipulations and review might be required with the addition of utilities as an assistance item? I am also going to punt that to a written amendment to make sure we can get you a clear answer on that. Will there be a mechanism to notify the provider of the need for a lead-based paint in-person inspection? I'm also going to punt that to written amendment to make sure we're getting that right. But thank you for those questions. Okay, our next question here is, are newly registered 501(c) nonprofits able to apply? So every RFP will have a section in there that says eligible respondents. And so for each RFP, that will say sort of who this process is open to for folks to apply. I can actually answer this one that across the board, yes, nonprofits, even newly registered nonprofits are eligible to apply for the Homeless Services Division RFPs. But do double check the RFP language as well to see if to make sure you meet any of the other eligibility criteria. Okay, next question here is, I'm taking this as a shelter RFP question. Is there a minimum expected reimbursement bed rate? So this is a great question. You will see that sort of in the shelter RFP, the sort of guidance on funding is really that each award will be sort of between, I think it was 100,000 to sort of 4.1 million, depending on the size and scope of the proposed program. This is based off of our sort of current minimum bed rate for shelters of $29 per bed per night. At this point, we were sort of not able to commit to a higher bed rate through this RFP, but we continue to elevate the need for additional funding here to support shelter operations. So if additional funding becomes available, we may sort of go up from that current minimum bed rate. I will also note that bed rates may vary based on shelter configuration, so sort of non-congregate versus congregate shelters, hours of operation, subpopulation served. Ultimately, DFSS is looking to fund a portfolio of shelters that could meet the variety of needs that Chicagoans have, and so the funding portfolio decisions will be made within the context of the entire portfolio. Okay, please repeat the statement regarding advances. So this is also specific to the shelter RFP, and a very good question. So basically, I'll try and say this in a slightly different way. You will see in the shelter RFP that we do have some language in there that suggests that advances for service costs will be considered according to the city's advance payment policy. And we are asking then for respondents to the RFP to indicate whether you would be interested in receiving advances rather than sort of only receiving funds on a reimbursement basis. We want to be clear that we are sort of DFSS is sort of pursuing this option with our partners within the city. And so sort of built this in to give us flexibility if that ends up being possible. But at this point, we cannot guarantee that we will be able to provide advances for these contracts awarded through the RFP. But tell me again if you need more clarity on that. Okay, next question here. Given that programs may be funded with a combination of funding sources, will there be separate reporting requirements depending on the funding source? That is a great question. I would say depending on the program model, there may be. Typically, DFSS sort of implements sort of standard quarterly reporting across our delegates that helps us meet the sort of variety of reporting requirements for us to report to our funders. But for some programs with sort of unique funding sources, there may be reporting requirements on top of that. For each RFP, there is a section in the narrative about sort of expected data reporting requirements, and feel free to follow up on a specific RFP if you're interested in the details. Okay, next question is, can you share the link to where these RFPs will be posted? Yes, I'm sure we can. I know that was shared in the group chat, the larger group chat earlier today, so I will dig that up.
I just shared it also in the chat with Jennifer. So if anyone looks at my message, Cameron Kinch is right there under my name.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, looking for clarity on how many new shelter programs we will fund versus programs that are already funded and reapplying. So overall for the shelter RFP, what you'll see in that RFP is that we are expecting to fund roughly 30 agencies. That is not a number that we are committed to. It is a range to give folks a sense of sort of how much funding and how many programs will be funded through this RFP. That total number will include any existing shelters or new shelters that are proposed. Okay, next question. How are homeless shelters provided with food? Is there a separate RFP for non-emergency day-to-day food items for the shelters specifically? Yeah, that's a great question. So we included in the program requirements for shelter programs is a plan to provide meals for clients on site. And so in some cases, our shelters, cook on site and provide food to residents that way. In some cases, shelters subcontract with a meal provider to bring in meals, but that is not a separate RFP. That is a requirement that is built into the shelter RFP to problem solve for how to provide meals for residents. Okay, for the shelter RFP, can you apply for more than one shelter? Yes. I am actually going to pull up the specific guidance for shelters because this is always a bit of a complicated piece. Okay, yeah, for folks who are applying for shelter, you will see this is a bit of a long RFP. But in terms of application guidance, we are asking respondents to apply indicating the population to be served. So there will be sort of a drop down of are you proposing to serve one of these population categories? That will include sort of general population, families with children, or families with children and individuals, general population for sort of single individuals, domestic violence specialization, youth specialization, medically vulnerable specialization, or other. Respondents need to submit a separate application for each population category they're applying to serve. So if an agency is applying to operate sort of one shelter program for families with children and another shelter program for single men, that needs to be submitted as two separate applications. But if an agency is applying to operate sort of multiple shelter programs within a population category, so let's say two shelter programs that are both serving families with children, they can apply under one application. The short version to answer your question is yes, you can apply for more than one shelter. And then just plug in the chat if that didn't answer your question. Okay, great. I see Cameron answered this one. So for everyone, there's a link to the RFP sort of narratives that have been released. So at this point, Office of Budget and Management has published the CDGA book that sort of previews all of the RFPs. The official applications will open on April 1st. Okay, one more question on the total number of shelters that will be funded. Again, we don't have a cap. We don't have a dedicated number of shelters that we will need to fund. Our best estimate is that we will fund 30 agencies through the shelter RFP. Okay, yeah, a good question in here on the centralized shelter intake, transportation and crisis response RFP on the contract term. I'll go back to that slide briefly. This is the one that has a slightly different contract period. And so the contract period in this RFP will be an initial term of January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2026. So a 1-year initial term with an option to extend for up to 4 additional years, each not to exceed sort of 1 year. And reasoning here is this sort of gives us the maximum flexibility to adjust that program model as needed based on sort of ongoing work with the current delegate. Okay, next question here is which programs won't fund new programs? So the only RFP that has any limitations to not funding new programs is our permanent supportive housing, supportive services RFP. The rest of them are open to new applicants. Angela, great question on sort of how many shelters overall there are in the city and how many beds does that translate into. So this is like where we get into the how many agencies versus programs versus sites. So for the sake of not confusing folks, we will answer that in a written amendment so we can get all those numbers out there. Next question is, will new initiatives for youth transitional housing be considered? Yes, we're accepting new applications for those programs. I think I answered this next one about the CDGA book versus individual RFPs being released on April 1st, but feel free to let me know in the chat if I did not. How many agencies are funded currently? I think I actually need some clarification on for which RFP that question is being asked, and then happy to chime in. Beth, good question. Yeah, so on combining shelter programs for the RFP. If an agency has 2 family shelters, that would be 1 application dealing with families, and 2 individual shelters, that would be another application dealing with individuals. Yes. I will also say the caveat that you do not need to combine those applications if you do not want to. So you could also submit separate applications for each program, or you can combine if you so choose. Guidance is the same from the previous RFP, so in case that's helpful too, what you did last time works this time. Okay, I think I covered the food piece, which is basically this question on how our homeless shelters provided with food. This is a responsibility that is part of operating a shelter, is to have a meals plan for residents, whether that is sort of cooking in-house or subcontracting for meals. Okay, once individual RFPs are released, will there be independent pre-submittal webinars, or is this the only webinar? Great question. We will not be having sort of separate independent webinars for each RFP. This is the sort of virtual session for CDGA RFPs. There will be another CDGA workshop organized by the Office of Budget and Management coming up next week. That will be in person April 7th at Malcolm X. And whatever communication got you here today also has details on that event. But to clarify for everyone who's here today, I think we will not be having, a different or new information shared at that in person. It will be sort of another touch point for folks to get sort of the same information that was shared today. Okay, I think we might have made it through the questions. Yes, okay, we've got a couple more coming in. Got it. Okay, another question.